yourself to the jury, please.
My name is Thomas Thompson, but my friends call me T-Bone Thompson.
And how old are you, Mr. Thompson?
Spry, 7 years of young.
And where do you live?
I live in Paradise Lone Star on Southport Ranch.
Tell us a little more about the ranch.
It's about 1,000 acres, but then there's an annex. It's about 40,000 acres.
And what sort of significant features do you have on this ranch?
I have a runway and an airplane hangar.
Okay, tell us a little more about the runway. How big is it?
It's just shy of about 6,000 feet.
And does it have any lights?
Yes.
What sort of lights? How do you work them?
We have a PAL system, but most of the time we manually switch them on and off.
Okay, well, what is a PAL system?
A PAL system is a system that we have installed, and it's designed so that pilots can actually turn the lights on and off themselves.
How do they do that?
They click the microphone on their plane.
Okay, so are they in the air or on the ground when they're doing this? Where are they?
When they're flying over, they can click their microphone and it should turn the lights on.
But if you don't want to use the PAL system, what do you do?
My friends would always call me and we'd have my ranch manager go out and turn the lights on for them manually.
All right, now your property, Southport Ranch, is that public or private?
Private.
And once you placed the, well, I'll ask you that in a minute, Mr. Thompson. Actually, I'd like to talk to you about the FAA, if you don't mind. Are you familiar with the Federal Aviation Administration?
Yes.
And what sort of rules does the FAA set out for private airstrips like yours that have PAL systems? Do you know if there are any?
I know there are. They send a circular around every once in a while with new rules.
And if I showed you that circular, would you recognize it?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to approach with what has been marked as Exhibit A and already entered into evidence?
Yep.
Mr. Thompson, I'm now handing you that advisory circular. I just want to ask you a few questions about it, if that's okay. Do you recall when you received the circular?
I do not.
But you've seen it before?
Yes.
Prior to today's proceedings?
Yes.
Well, let's take a look at the top of that circular. The portion that says application, that's number 2.
Okay.
Would you read that aloud to the jury?
The specifications contained in this AC are recommended by the FAA in all applications involving development of this nature. For airport projects receiving federal funds under the Airport Grant Assistance or the Passenger Facility Charge Program, the use of this specification is mandatory.
So how do these FAA rules apply to your property?
I have a private airstrip, and so these are the rules that I need to follow.
And did you receive a federal grant from the government?
I did.
Okay, and what sort of lighting system do you have?
A PAL system.
Now I'd like to review the maintenance and repair section under operating requirements. Please read 3.3.2A aloud to the jury.
The operator of the airport shall maintain the lighting facility consistent with the practices of reasonably prudent airport facility operators.
And if you would read 3.3.2B, I know it's a little long, but read that aloud to the jury.
If the lighting system fails to perform as designed, the operator shall undertake all necessary repairs to ensure that the system performs in accordance with its design and with the requirements of this circular. Such repairs shall be completed within a reasonable time after the operator becomes aware of any deficiency in the system performance.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. 3.3.2A says that you must maintain the lighting facility with reasonably prudent practices. But does it tell you what a reasonably prudent practice is?
It does not.
And what about taking reasonable steps to fix the lights? Does it tell you what reasonable steps are?
It does not.
It gives no further specification?
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. You can set that to the side. Were you aware on August 18th, 2013, that the POW system on your runway was not working?
One of my friends had mentioned something to me earlier.
Okay, so had that indicated to you for certain that the lights weren't working?
I was not certain that they were not working.
And what exactly happened that alerted you they might not be working?
I had a friend use my runway a few days earlier, and he told me that they weren't.
Okay, and what did you do once you learned this?
I sent an email to my ranch hand or my ranch manager, and told him that he needed to fix the problem.
And who is your ranch manager? What's his name?
C. Barrett Collins.
Okay, one moment. Permission to approach with what has already been entered into evidence is Exhibit 12?
Yep.
Mr. Thompson, I'm handing you that email. What email is this?
This is an email I sent to Mr. Thomas about the runway lighting.
When did you send that email?
August 10th, 9:55 p.m.
And when was that in correlation with your friend trying to use the POW system?
The same day that he arrived at my ranch, or same night, I should say.
And who did you send it to again?
My ranch manager, Mr. Thomas.
And what's his job? What does he do for you?
He's basically my right hand on the ranch. He is the one that will turn the lights on and off for me when I fly my plane in, and drives me around to and from the hangar to the house.
What about checking on the property or ever fixing the property? What do you know about his duties in regards to that?
He takes care of all that stuff for me.
And if you wouldn't mind reading one more thing for me, Mr. Thompson, read that email aloud to the jury.
C. Barrett, I'm out at South Fork entertaining some folks. They told me that the runway lights wouldn't come on when they did the click thing. Since you're not out here and you're not answering your phone, they had to call me at the big house. Good thing they could get cell service from their G4. I had to send the cook over to turn the darn things on by hand. Not good, and the food got cold. Nothing worse than cold ribs, except Aggie football, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Please tell me where in that email you explicitly state, Mr. Barrett, fix the runway lights.
I normally don't need to tell Mr. Barrett things like that.
So is that in the email?
No,
And why don't you have to say explicitly, fix the lights?
because when I tell Mr. Barrett that something's wrong, he goes out and he takes care of it for me.
So it goes without saying.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Thompson, you found out that the lights might not be working on August 10th, and then they still weren't working on August 18th. But what could you have done yourself with your own two hands to go out there and fix that POW system?
Probably nothing.
Because, I mean, what do you know about POW systems?
That you click the microphone and it turns on.
What do you know about the internal wires and cogs and whatever's inside that system that makes it work?
Absolutely nothing. Mr. Barrett handles all that stuff for me. And anyone he calls to work on that stuff.
And if you wouldn't mind, I'm not going to make you read it again out loud, but if you'll pick up that FAA circular and answer a few more questions for me. Where in that circular, Mr. Thompson, does it tell you who to call to fix those lights?
It doesn't.
Where does it say you can look to find information and maybe try and do it yourself?
It doesn't.
Where does it require that you yourself get out there with your own two hands and fix it?
It doesn't.
And what does it require that you do?
Take care of it in a reasonably prudent time.
And what did you do when you learned that those lights might not be working?
What was reasonably prudent for someone in my position?
And what was that?
I emailed Mr. Barrett
When?
as soon as I knew they were out.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson, please answer any questions opposing counsel may have for you. May I put those exhibits
Yeah.
back to the clerk? Thank you.
Can I have permission to set up a demonstrative or had it supposed to set up?
Yep.
runway, right?
That's correct.
And in this email, you talked about needing to cut some of those runway costs.
That's correct.
And that's because it's expensive to maintain a runway, isn't it?
It is.
In fact, you even said that the runway expenses are not in line with the benefits. Is that true?
I don't remember specifically.
Mr. Thompson, do you remember writing a statement for today, or being deposed for today?
Yes, I do.
And is that statement true and accurate?
Yes, it is.
All right, Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?
Yes.
All right, can you point me to what line?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
All right, Mr. Thompson, let's just look through this. This is the deposition you gave, correct?
Yes.
And does it look to be fully accurate?
Yes, it is.
And is this your signature right here?
Yes, it is.
Now, Mr. Thompson, right here you say, when you were talking about this email that you sent, you say that the expenses were not in line with the benefits. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So is that your statement in court today?
Yes, it is.
So, now, Mr. Thompson, to pay for these lights, you accepted a federal grant, correct?
Yes, I did.
And when you accepted the grant, it came with some rules.
Yes.
And in order to get the grant, you had to read these rules,
I did.
and you had to agree to them,
Mhm.
and you understood what you were agreeing to.
I read the rules, yes.
And you understood them, correct?
I understood them to the best of my ability.
So, and these rules, I know you talked about them and read them out loud to the court several times, but let me approach you with them. Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what's already been entered as Exhibit 8?
Yep.
Now, don't worry, I won't make you read anything, Mr. Thompson, but if you would look with me again at maintenance and repair under 3.32.
Mhm.
So, in these rules, this says basically if those lights break, you gotta fix them, right?
That's correct.
And it says you have to fix them within a reasonable amount of time,
That's correct.
which means the completion of the repair must be done within a reasonable amount of time.
That's correct.
But it also says that it's mandatory for you to undertake a repair when you learn that those lights don't work.
That's correct.
So, on August 10th, when you found out that those lights weren't working, you undertook a repair by sending one email, right?
Yes.
And now you didn't follow up to make sure that your runway manager had gotten that email.
No, I know that he got it.
You didn't go out and talk to him in person and make sure that he got it.
I normally don't need to follow up with Mr. Berger on things like
Your
that.
Honor, I object to this line of questioning in the rules which we gave to you in the packet earlier, the competition rules, not stipulations. It was guaranteed that all emails sent to and from were received.
Yeah, that's what you just said, right?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe so. But Counselor asked him again in regards to that it wasn't received, whether or not what he did to follow up with it.
Your Honor, we're not concerned that the email wasn't received. We were asking if Mr. Thompson had gone to speak with his ranch manager about the email.
Yep, overruled.
Thanks, Mr. Thompson. Now, so you said that you don't need to follow up with him because when something's broken, and he takes care of it, right?
Yes.
But these lights weren't working on August 10th, right?
Yes.
And they weren't working on August 11th,
Yes.
and they weren't working on August 12th.
Probably not.
So, from August 10th to August 18th, your runway manager was supposed to take care of it, right?
That's correct.
But he didn't during that time, did he?
I don't know what came up with him that he didn't get it done, but I'm sure he has a good reason as to why the lights weren't fixed in that time.
Okay, so when you found out that those lights weren't working,
inform my friends that normally use my runway.
The friends that tried it and the system didn't work for them, right?
Yes, and other friends that would use my runway from time to time.
Okay, and Mr. Thompson, you would recognize a picture of your runway if you saw it, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to publish a demonstrative of an exhibit that has already been previously entered?
Sure.
Mr. Thompson, this is a picture of your runway,
Yes.
right? And in this picture, there's a little bit of daylight, isn't there?
Yes.
But in this picture, the PAL system is working, correct?
Correct.
And on August 18th, when Mr. Fortenberry was trying to land, the PAL system was not working.
Correct.
So that would mean that these lights over here, they weren't on.
Mm-hmm.
And then these lights over here, those weren't on either.
Yes.
And that crash happened in the middle of the night, right?
Right.
Now, Mr. Thompson, you went out to see the crash site the next day, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And would you recognize a picture of that crash site that you saw?
Yes.
Your Honor, showing opposing counsel Exhibit 5.
Mm-hmm.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what's been marked as Exhibit 5?
Yep.
Mr. Thompson, this is what you saw when you went out that night, or when you went out to see the crash site, correct?
Yes.
And is this a true and accurate picture of what you saw?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers Exhibit number 5 into evidence and permission to publish a demonstrative that's enlarged.
One second, any objection?
No, Your Honor, we have no objection.
So then you can publish.
Now, Mr. Thompson, this is what you saw when you went to the crash site, right?
Yes.
Thank you, nothing further at this time. Permission to publish evidence to the jury?
Yeah. Do we have redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. I ask for a moment to take down the demonstratives.
Sure.
Mr. Thompson, when or where did the FAA require you to call them if the lights were broken?
Not in the circular.
Who did the FAA require you to call?
No one.
Where did the FAA, or when did they ever inform you that you were expected to get out there and fix the PAL system with your two hands?
It doesn't say that.
And what did they require of you?
To repair the lights in a reasonable time.
And what did you do?
I did what I reasonably would do to repair those lights.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, witnesses excused, who's our next witness?
Your Honor, the defense calls Kim Bates to the stand. May I please report?
Yep.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Kim Bates,
Where are you from, Miss Bates?
from Paris, Lone Star.
Are you an employee?
Yes, I am.
Where?
I own my own consulting engineering firm.
So what degrees did you have?
I have a bachelor's in philosophy from Columbia University, and I have a master's in aeronautical engineering from Tarleton.
After you graduated with your master's, what did you do?
I worked for 12 years at a helicopter manufacturing unit in Fort Worth.
After those 12 years, what did you do then?
That's when I left and I started my own consulting business.
In your consulting business, what exactly do you do?
We specialize in consulting with aircraft manufacturers and their lawyers on matters of litigation.
You mentioned litigation. Does that mean you've testified in court before?
Yes, I have on numerous occasions.
So tell us what goes into investigating an aircraft accident. What parts of the accident do you look at?
We review
Do you look at just the plane, or do you look at other things surrounding the plane?
We look at other factors, we look at the weather, we look at what the wind was that day, we look at the area they were flying over, the plane, landing strip, all of that.
So what was your role in today's case?
I was hired to review, the evidence in this case for the defendant.
What did you review for that?
All the depositions, reviewed each and every one of the exhibits, and reviewed the FAA regulations and the obligations of the pilot calculations.
Do you use reliable methods in your field of
Yes.
accident reconstruction?
Sorry, yes.
That's okay. Did you apply those principles to the facts of today's case?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense offers Kim Bates as an expert in aircraft accident reconstruction.
All right, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff would request permission to voir dire this witness prior to having her tendered as an expert to the court.
All right, any objection to what?
No, Your Honor.
All right.
Good afternoon, Ms. Bates. Now, you said you are trained as an aeronautical engineer. Is that right?
That's correct. I have a master's degree in aeronautical engineering.
That's what you studied in school.
Yes.
Now, aeronautical engineering deals with the aerodynamics of planes,
Yes.
how planes' engines works,
Yes.
how the wings and propellers and all the different items on an airplane interact with each other.
That's correct.
Now, you do not have a degree in mechanical engineering, do you?
No.
Now, that means you've never actually built or installed an airport runway, have you?
No.
You've never built or installed a pilot-activated lighting system like the one at South Fork Ranch, have you?
No, I haven't.
You've never maintained a system, a PAL system like the one on South Fork Range.
No, I haven't.
In fact, you've never even looked at the PAL system on South Fork Range, have you?
Not the one on South Fork, but throughout my many years of accident investigation, I've seen the system, and I've come to learn how they operate.
Well, Ms. Bates, let's make sure we understand. Now, you included a lot of information in your deposition about your background, didn't you?
Yes.
You included where you went to high school,
Yes.
your philosophy degree,
Yes.
but although you included all that information, you never said anything about working with a PAL system before, did you?
It did not come up in my deposition.
But that's a no to my question. When you were deposed under oath about your qualifications, you never mentioned working with a PAL system.
I never volunteered the information, but again, it was never asked.
But that's a no to my question. You never testified to that.
I've never testified to that.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff objects to the qualification of Ms. Bates as an expert in the broad field of accident reconstruction. We anticipate that the defense will use Ms. Bates to testify specifically to what was wrong with the pilot-activated lighting system on South Fork Range. Based on the voir dire and the questions that Ms. Bates just answered under oath, she has no familiarity with the system specifically, and she's never actually been to South Fork Range to investigate that system. And that goes to two separate parts of the rules of evidence that she must satisfy. First, her experience with this specific system overall, and second, the information she had to base her conclusions on this case. So both under Rule 701, her expertise as a general witness, and 702, her expertise into the matters that she's actually going to testify to here today, she cannot be qualified that broadly, and we ask that the court restrict the scope of her expertise to aeronautical engineering.
All right, any response?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bates does possess the requisite experience and knowledge needed under Rule 702 to come to these expert conclusions. She already testified that her job as an accident reconstructionist is very broad. It includes not only the plane, but everything that could possibly make a plane crash. From the runway to the lights, to trees, to the plane, to the fuel, to the calculations. It's a very broad scope of what she does. Therefore, the PAL system would fall into her realm of expertise. Now, the plaintiff's counsel argues that she hasn't seen the PAL system, and Your Honor, that's not required under the rules. She was provided information about the PAL system, and her expert knowledge that she has before this case would allow her to come to expert conclusions regarding the PAL system without having seen it.
All right, I agree. We're going to admit the witness as an expert in the field of accident reconstruction. Is that right?
specifically to aircrafts, Your Honor.
All right.
Ms. Bates, are you being paid for your time here today?
Yes, I am.
How much?
$650 for my in-court testimony.
So we've heard a lot about Mr. Fortenberry today. Did you come to any conclusions about Mr. Fortenberry and his flight on August 18th?
Yes, his failure to appropriately calculate the fuel is what led to the crash.
You mentioned calculations. What goes into calculating the fuel that a pilot needs?
You need to know the distance you'll be traveling from point A to point B. You need to know how much fuel the plane carries and at what rate the plane is going to burn that fuel.
How important are these calculations?
They're vital. If they're done wrong, they lead to disaster.
And what rules tell a pilot that they have to do these calculations before they fly?
FAA regulations.
Would you recognize a copy of those if I showed it to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness, what's already been entered as Exhibit 7.
Sure.
Do you recognize this, Ms. Bates?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us how you use those regulations and come to your conclusions about Mr. Fortenberry?
Yes, I used them to review how he did his calculations to see if he was in compliance with the FAA regulations.
So what's the first thing under those regulations that a pilot has to do?
Before they even leave the ground, they must, are you talking about the top part?
Is there anything about fuel in there? You mentioned fuel, right?
Yes, sorry.
So what does the pilot have to, how does the pilot have to fuel their plane before they fly?
They have to make sure that they have enough fuel for their distance, and then they also have to have an additional 45 minutes at normal cruising speed for their aircraft.
Did Mr. Fortenberry do that?
No, he did not,
How do you know he didn't?
because the plane ran out of fuel and crashed.
Well, let's break that down a little bit. Do you know how long Mr. Fortenberry was going to travel that day?
He's traveling 480 miles.
And you mentioned that you have to divide that by the cruising speed of the aircraft, right?
That's correct.
So what was the cruising speed of the Piper Cygnet?
120 miles per hour.
So how much fuel, or how long would it have taken Mr. Fortenberry to get to his destination based on that?
4 hours.
So how many gallons of fuel would he have needed to make that 4-hour journey in his plane?
40 gallons.
And you mentioned that in addition to the fuel then, to get to their destination, that pilots have to have an additional 45 minutes.
Yes, so he would have had to have an additional 7.5 gallons to be in compliance with the FAA regulations.
And did he have that additional 7.5 gallons?
He did not. The plane he was flying only carries 45 usable gallons of fuel, so to need 47.5, he would never have been able to have it.
So let's just clarify that for a minute. Mr. Fortenberry's plane carried how much fuel?
45 gallons.
And how much fuel did he need to comply with those regulations?
47.5 gallons.
Were you able to review anything else that shared your conclusion that Mr. Fortenberry ran out of fuel?
Yes, after I reached my conclusion independently, I then reviewed the NTSB report, and they came to the same conclusion that there was insufficient fuel in the plane.
Will looking at a copy of that report help you help your testimony today?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve what's already been entered in evidence as Exhibit 1 and approach the witness. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
How did you use that NTSB report in your coming to your conclusions about Mr. Fortenberry?
Well, as I said, I looked at it after I formed my own conclusion, and I found that the NTSB had also come to the same conclusion that the post-incident investigation revealed there was very limited fuel, and that the engine was not producing power due to the lack of fuel. But the fuel lines were intact, and the engine was in proper running condition, so if it had the fuel, it would have been able to run properly.
What did the NTSB, what conclusion did they come to as the probable cause of this accident?
That the aircraft lost engine power due to insufficient fuel.
You mentioned earlier that in addition to the cruising speed of the aircraft and the distance, that wind plays an important part in the calculations. Can you tell us little more about that?
Yes, wind plays a very important part. If there's no wind, then you're gonna travel the normal speed that the plane is expected to fly at when it's in the air. But if there's a headwind, a crosswind, or a tailwind, it's gonna affect the speed that the plane actually travels, which means the distance that it needs to go. The time will be adjusted it takes to travel that distance.
So tell us how a headwind would affect a flight.
A headwind is gonna slow down your actual progression. So if you're flying, if the normal cruising speed is 120 miles, and there's a 20-mile headwind that the plane is flying into, the actual speed of that plane is only going to be 100 miles per hour, so it'll take longer to get to your destination.
What about a tailwind, Ms. Bates?
A tailwind is beneficial in aircraft because it speeds up the plane. So again, if you're traveling at your normal 120 miles, but there's a 20-mile-an-hour tailwind, then you actually cover more ground in less time.
Where would Mr. Fortenberry have found this information about the winds?
The NOAA provides a forecast of what the winds are, where an airplane actually travels up in the sky as opposed to ground conditions.
You mentioned ground conditions. Is that what Mr. Fortenberry used?
Yes, he used just a local weather report for Dallas only, and again, so that does not calculate what the wind would have been where the plane actually was.
How did looking at only the local weather report affect Mr. Fortenberry's calculations?
It meant that his calculations were inaccurate. He was not going to have the proper information to make an accurate calculation to know how much fuel he needed for the flight.
Ms. Bates, could this accident have been avoided?
Yes, absolutely. If he had done his calculations properly, he would have known how far he would have gone and how much fuel he would have needed.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor. Permission to return the exhibits to the clerk.
And Your Honor, we would request permission to briefly set up a demonstrative.
Sure.
And Your Honor, if I may approach and retrieve exhibits 10 and 11.
Sure. I don't discuss that you didn't admit it, also.
Now, Ms. Bates, you were talking about a NOAA forecast that you used to perform the calculations. Is that right?
That's correct.
You said that the NOAA forecast is the most accurate one in the business.
It's the most reliable one for pilots, yes.
But it's what a pilot should look at.
Yes, a reasonable pilot would look at that.
Your Honor, I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 10.
All right.
May I approach the witness?
Sure.
Now, Ms. Bates, that's a copy of the NOAA forecast from 7:53 p.m. on August the 18th. Is that correct?
Yes,
That's a true and accurate copy of that forecast?
I believe so.
Hasn't been changed or altered in any way?
Not that I can see.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff moves to enter Plaintiff's Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right.
And you said that forecast, it gives a pilot the information that they need to properly make those fuel calculations. Is that right?
Yes.
You said that it's better than the local forecast.
It's more reliable because it's actually calculating the wind speed where the plane is flying as opposed to what it is on the ground.
Well, let's talk about that forecast a little bit. Now, you would agree with me that a pilot, when they take off, it's important that they know the weather that they're going to encounter along their entire route.
Well, not only is it important, but it's required by FAA.
That the FAA requires someone to know the conditions that they're going to be flying into in between their takeoff point and their destination.
Yes.
That's because a pilot, if they didn't know that information, could unknowingly fly into a storm.
That's correct.
They could fly into a windstorm, a thunderstorm.
That's correct.
They need that information to know what conditions to expect.
Yes.
You said the NOAA report, in your expert opinion, is what a pilot needs to look at to get that information.
It's It's the most reliable forecast that a pilot should look at.
Now, Ms. Bates, I want you to look at that NOAA forecast that you were talking about, the one you told us that was so reliable. Now, where on what destinations does that report give the weather forecast for?
Kansas City, or destination, Dallas-Fort Worth?
And it also gives the forecast for Kansas City.
Yes.
But those are the only two places it gives the weather forecast for, right?
On this one, yes.
But that's the forecast you told us is the most reliable one.
Yes.
That should tell a pilot the information they need about the conditions they'll expect while they're flying.
Yes, these are the cities the pilot was flying, so yes.
But that report doesn't tell a pilot what the conditions are going to be an hour into their flight, do they?
This one does not.
That report that you told us is so reliable, it doesn't tell a pilot the conditions they're going to find halfway through their flight, does it?
No.
It doesn't tell a pilot the conditions over South Fork Ranch, does it?
I mean, it's not a specific one location, but over Dallas-Fort Worth, it says what that condition is.
That forecast gives a pilot no information for anywhere along their route other than their takeoff point and their destination.
That's correct.
Based on that report, a pilot wouldn't know the conditions in between their takeoff point and their destination.
Not on this report, but not from looking at local weather either.
But based on that report that you told us was the most reliable one, that information isn't there.
It is not.
Now, let's talk about the report that we know Zeke Fortenberry looked at. Now, that weather forecast, it also tells the wind speeds for Dallas, just like the NOAA report does.
The wind speed's on the ground, not where the plane is traveling thousands of feet above.
But it gives the weather in Dallas, is that right?
On the ground, yes.
Now, in those FAA rules, it doesn't tell a pilot they have to look at this NOAA forecast.
Tells them to look at a reliable forecast.
Well, it doesn't really say that either, does it, Ms. Bates? It says an appropriate forecast.
Yes,
But it never directs the pilot to a specific website.
it does not.
It doesn't tell a pilot they can't look at a local TV forecast.
It does not.
Now, you talked about these calculations that you use the NOAA forecast for, but let's talk about calculations based on the information we know Zeke Fortenberry did, using the local forecast.
Permission to reposition.
Now, Ms. Bates, you would agree with me that based on the local forecast, Zeke Fortenberry would have seen there was a 10-mile-per-hour tailwind.
I'm sorry, I only have the NOAA forecast, so is that the forecast you want me to base that agreement off of?
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yeah.
All right. Ms. Bates, based on this forecast, the one that you said you learned Zeke Fortenberry, we know he looked at, that would have told him he had a 10-mile-per-hour tailwind.
Yes. Yes.
That means that his plane would have been moving at 130 miles per hour through the sky.
Yes.
That means it would have taken him 3.7 hours to reach his destination.
Yes.
And based on the plane he was flying, that would have required 37 gallons worth of fuel. Is that correct?
For the flight, well, plus the 45 minutes.
Well, we'll get to the 45 minutes, Ms. Bates, but to reach Dallas, his destination, based on the calculations you did, it would have taken him 37 gallons.
Yes.
And that's to reach Dallas.
Yes.
But as you said, he had to carry a little bit extra in case of emergencies,
Correct.
in case he ran into bad weather.
Yes.
Now, based on the burn rate of his plane, he would have had to carry 7.5 extra gallons.
Yes.
Now, I'm no expert, Ms. Bates, but you would agree with me that this calculation tells us that Zeke, to comply with the rules, would have needed to carry 44.5 gallons worth of fuel on his plane.
That's correct.
Now, Zeke Fortenberry's plane, if fully fueled, could carry 45 gallons.
That's correct.
That means if Zeke Fortenberry's plane was fully fueled, he could have been in compliance with the rules.
Based on the forecast for Dallas only.
Based on the forecast we know Zeke Fortenberry looked at, the calculations we just talked about, he could have been in compliance with the rules.
Could have been with the plane crash due to insufficient fuel, so apparently he wasn't.
But you don't actually know what the weather was that night, do you?
Looking at these reports,
Now, Ms. Bates, accuracy is very important in your field, isn't it?
yes,
You would agree with me that those are just weather forecasts.
yes,
They don't tell a pilot what the wind speed is actually going to be.
correct.
Based on those forecasts, a pilot never really knows what they're going to encounter along their route, do they?
No, this gives them a good idea of what to anticipate.
But they can never know for sure what they're going to encounter, can they?
That's correct, that's why you should make sure you have enough fuel.
Ms. Bates, we talked about the rules that Zeke Fortenberry followed, but let's talk about all the rules that Thomas Thompson failed to follow. Now, Mr. Thompson, he owned a runway on South Fork Ranch.
Correct.
Now, you told us that it would have taken him upwards of a month to fix this pilot-activated lighting system, right?
Yes.
But you have never actually gone to South Fork Ranch to look at that pilot-activated light system, have you?
No, I haven't.
You never drove out and inspected its pieces and parts?
No.
But you were in the courtroom today and heard that Mr. Williams actually, or Miss Williams actually took a look at that PAL system.
Yes.
You learned that the only thing that was wrong with it was the radio was broken.
According to her, yes.
But when you told us that it would take a month to fix that, you didn't know what was wrong with that radio, did you?
I didn't say it would take a month to fix it. I said probably a reasonable person would have gotten it fixed within 30 days. I didn't say that that is exactly what it would have taken to fix it.
But sitting here today, you can't tell us what was wrong with that radio.
No.
You can't tell us if simply the antenna was broken,
No.
maybe it was unplugged,
Could have been.
but you don't know.
I don't know.
Mr. Thompson was responsible for maintaining that runway, wasn't he?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson was responsible for repairing that runway, wasn't he?
He was responsible for getting repairs done. That doesn't mean he personally needed to go out there and repair it, since, as you stated, you need to have professionals do that.
Mr. Thompson was the sole owner of that property and the sole person who agreed to the rules you looked at.
Correct.
It was his job to get those lights fixed.
Within a reasonable time, yes.
And because you never even went to South Fork Ranch, you can't tell us if he ever got them fixed, can you?
If he ever, I'm just simply here to speak about the accident and what was in accordance on the day of the accident.
But you can never tell us if Mr. Thompson ever undertook repairs, can you?
I cannot.
Objection,
Right,
Your Honor.
thank you. No
This is-
further questions, Your Honor.
So no objection?
Well, I mean, I would object to that as improper, Your Honor, because that, never mind.
All right, well, overruled.
And Your Honor, I would ask to preserve the exhibit.
Any objection to that?
No.
All right.
Permission to approach the witness with Exhibit A.
Yep.
What is that, Ms. Bates?
It is an advisory circular issued by the FAA.
And how does it describe the way in which Mr. Thompson had to fix the runway?
The operator of the airport shall maintain the lighting facility consistent with the practices of a reasonably prudent airport facility operator.
Did he do that?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
When he became aware of the issue, he alerted his maintenance man and was undertaking things to get it fixed.
Now, the plaintiff's counsel asked you some questions about the fuel that Mr. Fortenberry had in his plane.
Yes.
And they told you that based on the weather report Mr. Fortenberry looked at, he would have had 44.5 gallons of fuel in his plane, right?
Objection, legal.
I'm just trying to clarify these calculations, Your Honor.
Okay, yeah, we'll give you a little leeway.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, based on the Dallas forecast.
What weather report did Mr. Fortenberry use to come to these calculations?
The WFAA 8 local weather.
using a local weather report for calculations like this appropriate?
No, pilots should rely on something that actually indicates what the wind speed is, where the plane is flying, not just on the ground.
How would what is the most reliable weather report?
The NOAA report is the most reliable.
Did Mr. Fortenberry use that?
He did not.
And how would
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
the plaintiff's counsel already went into using the local weather report, Your Honor? Again, I'm just trying to clarify what's already been brought up on cross.
Your Honor, may I be heard? Specifically, the question was, did Zeke Fortenberry look at the NOAA weather report? Now, no foundation has been laid that this witness has any knowledge of this specific report and how it relates to Zeke Fortenberry, whether he looked at it or not.
All right, yeah, I kinda gotta agree. If we can lay that foundation, maybe that evidence can come in, but for now, we'll sustain the objection.
Based on the calculations that you've seen that Mr. Fortenberry, that the plaintiff's counsel states Mr. Fortenberry did he use the NOAA report?
No, he used the local weather report.
So how would his calculations have been different had he used the NOAA report?
The NOAA report,
What would it have told him?
what the wind would have been in Kansas City as well as Dallas Fort Worth. So if there was a headwind in one area and a tailwind in a different area.
How many gallons of fuel would he have needed if he had used the correct weather report?
47.5.
And how many did his plane hold?
45.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Yeah, the witness is